And welcome back to day 4 of our continuing coverage of the World Meeting of Families, coming to you from the Pennsylvania Convention Center right here in the heart of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where this Saturday the Holy Father will be. Of course, you've seen him in Washington, D.C., and pretty soon he'll be on his way to New York. We'll have complete coverage of that tonight with Raymond Arroyo. We have some great guests coming up, including the great Janet Smith coming up shortly. But first, we wanted to have a conversation with our own Janet Benkovic of Women of Grace and one of our employee chaplains at EWTN, Father John Paul, about the wonderful World Meeting of Families that we have going on here today. What's your take so far? I mean, we had a great talk yesterday, I think, by, that keynote address by Helen Alvarez gave that, got a standing ovation. There were some other exciting interviews that we did as well. People got to see those and some of the talks today. We've got some great guests lined up. Coming up after Janet Smith, we've got Curtis Martin coming up, Rose Sweet, Sue Brinkman. We're excited about that. It's something we'll get to talk about. It has to do with Women of Grace, as well as Father Michael Shields and Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers as well. So with all of that happening, there's so much to take in. What's your major takeaway so far? Well,
I'll tell you, what I have been so pleased about is the variety of talks on topics that hit all aspects of family life. And I know that Father, and I'm hoping that you'll share with us a little bit, last evening Janet Smith gave a beautiful talk on the elderly, using her own life experience, caring for her mother who has dementia. So this gives us some insight into the variety of aspects. Helen Alvarez, of course, addressing the needs of women. And how it is that we as women are called to represent that feminine ideal in the world today, what that means. It's been just a power-packed event. And you can tell from the crowds. I mean, I'm sure that many of our viewers can see the crowd that is surrounding the booth right now. People are animated. They're excited. They feel a real sense of drive, I think, that's coming from what they're hearing. And encouragement, because so often people feel isolated in their beliefs today, but what they're experiencing is not an isolation, but a general sense of belonging to a family, a large universal family, all moving in the same direction, and that's encouraging.
And one of the things, Father, we like to say at EWTN is we're the largest Catholic family in the world, so it's really, really important. What about yourself? You got to hear Janet Smith's talk, right?
It was a great talk last night. She addressed, I think, from her own personal experience. She wasn't talking abstractly. She was talking about her own experience taking care of her mother who has dementia, and it kind of brought me to tears a little bit, thinking about how my family took care of my grandfather in his last years. And she mentioned many practical things about being patient with them, not when they bring up things, say, a zillion times. She was saying, and she's very humorous, as our viewers will see in a few minutes, very humorous. And just to be patient with that. And just it was very encouraging, I think, to everybody that heard, just the importance of taking care of the elderly in many different stages.
How much of that has to do with growing up in a loving family and connecting that way? One of the groups here, Holy Cross Family Ministries, had done a recent survey on the practice of faith in the Catholic family for the ages 25 through 45, which is the millennial generation or Generation X. And one of the things they found is that though there's a fair amount, 49% of young Catholic parents consider their faith very important, but they don't really go to Mass. They tend to pray, but they tend to pray by themselves. And that's where we really have to emphasize, the great meaning of the Mass is the great prayer of the Church, right? As well as the fact that there's a community there. It's not just me and Jesus, right?
Well, the reality is that Jesus instituted the Eucharist, and he did that on the Last Supper, and at the same time he instituted the priesthood and the Church too at Pentecost. And he calls all of us into what in Greek ecclesia, a calling together of the multitudes. And there are times for private prayer, where we're in communication with the Lord. But when we celebrate the Eucharist, you need a priest to do that. And the reality is that within the Church, you need a priest, a validly ordained priest, to celebrate the Eucharist, to celebrate the sacraments. And I always tell people this, it's very simply that when people go to Mass, they don't come to Mass as just bystanders. as just they're looking at what I'm doing up there. I'm doing something different and they're doing something different. No. I'm offering, as a priest, I'm offering the one perfect sacrifice of Christ to the Father. But they, as lay faithful, they are bringing their sacrifices, their prayers, their very selves, their whole life. Why? In order to be united to that perfect sacrifice on the altar. So, I mean, that's why we need the church, to come together around the Eucharist, because we need, the Eucharist, as St. John Paul II says, the Eucharist is what makes the church and what builds the church up.
And it occurs to me, too, that there are numbers of ways in which families can bring the Mass home with them. And this will help to spark within the children a connection between what they see on Sunday and what happens in the family life. Talking about the readings of the day. Maybe when you're gathered around the table, having your meal together, say, let's talk about how it is that Eucharist nourishes our soul as this food nourishes our body. Make a connection between that and the Last Supper, for example.
Yes.
All of these ways will help to foment a deeper understanding, appreciation,
and of course,
and
that's
entry
what
into the
we're
Mass.
for our present Holy Father as well, that really communitarian, the idea of community, and that's what we need to make sure inside the church, because the church is a family as well. With that, we've got to take a break because we want to make sure we have time to talk to Janet Smith. She's coming up next. I'm Doug Keck here with Janet Benkovic and Father John Paul, coming to you live from the 8th World Meeting of Families in Pennsylvania, and we're in Philadelphia at the Convention Center. Stay with us, much more ahead. And we are back here at the 8th World Meeting of Families at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. I'm Doug Keck here with Janet Benkovic, my co-host all week. And we're joined on set by a great friend of EWTN and the network. It's Dr. Janet Smith, a professor of theology at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, the Father McGivney Chair of Life and Ethics as well, right?
Yes.
Because of the Knights of Columbus. And, you had one of the greatest. There was a Scott Hahn tape and there's a Janet Smith tape. The Janet Smith tape was the Contraception, Why Not? Over 2 million distributed, and now you've got a great new book, right? Living the Truth, that you put together with Father Paul Check. On Ignatius Press.
Approaches to same-sex issues.
And this is having to do with same-sex marriage, of course, Father Check from Courage, and we've been running a lot of programs from them. So it's great to have you here. We were talking about you in the first segment, where Father John Paul had the privilege of attending your wonderful talk, as he described it, about dealing, I guess, really had to do with the elderly, and a personal thing really relating to your mother. Was it dementia you were dealing with?
Yes, my mother has dementia. I've now become her full-time caretaker. So I'm getting lots of help. You couldn't do it by yourself, so far as I know.
Well, let me ask you one question, which is there a connection between the idea of dealing with contraception, which is what you were dealing with at one point, and now you're focused on same-sex marriage? Is that a continuum? Is there a connection? Is there a reason you switched over?
Well, I haven't really switched, I've just added, but well, there's such a connection. I mean, there's only about 2% of the population that say they have same-sex attraction, all right? Somewhat higher for males, somewhat lower for females. So you're trying to figure out why the whole nation has become sort of obsessed with this issue and accepting of it. As short as 10 years ago, people were not. And so something has happened, and I really think it's because we are a contraceptive culture. That once you think that sex is just for expressing pleasure or affection, then why not? Why not really any combination? If you believe that sex has to have the procreative element in the picture, then it's very clear why same-sex unions are wrong, or any other polygamy, any possibilities. But so once you've accepted contraception, which takes the baby-making power out of the sexual act, renders the sexual act something simply for physical union, why not many combinations? So I think it's really corroded people's natural understanding. And my guess is, if you were to poll a group of people who abide by the Church's teaching on contraception, use natural family planning, you would not find supporters for same-sex unions in that group, because they are living in a very self-sacrificial way. I mean, they are, we talk about any arrangement outside of marriage open to children. it's all hard to discipline yourself, to be unmarried and not have sex, to have same-sex attractions and not be able to have sex. Well, I want to say, do you know how often it is that married people can't have sex, for all sorts of reasons, and the discipline that they have to exercise when they have someone who loves them right beside them in bed. So there's no free ride on the sex business, but contraception gives people what they think is a free ride, and it becomes a very undisciplined way of life. And so you say, well, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing, so I'm going to let everybody else do what they're doing. That's a certain
amount of guilt that says, well,
I have to re-examine my life.
You don't give me a hard time, I won't bother you, right?
Yeah, I think if I said that sex has to be procreative and that's why people with same-sex attraction can't have sex, then the person that's contracepting has to say, well, wait a minute, what am I doing?
And I want to thank you because you take on the tough issues, Janet. You always have. You're a woman of courage and you're a voice of truth. And we need that today. We need it desperately. And when we think about this whole issue of same-sex attraction, and as you say, the way in which the country is just really rallied around this, even changing the definition and now allowing this to be something that involves what we're calling marriage, but we know, of course, that it's not. It leads me to believe that so much of this is coming from a false sense of compassion. It's a total misunderstanding of love, that love in some way always needs to have a sexual expression, and that involves two people coming together in a relationship that way. But that's not what love truly is. Love is about self-donation. It's about giving yourself to another with just an absolute desire to be at the service of another. Whether that's ever sexualized or not is not the issue.
Right. I mean, that's very much what our book is about, living the truth in love. You're right that many people are accepting of it because of a false compassion. And in a certain sense, what's foundational to our approach here is listening to the testimonies who've lived out a gay lifestyle, all right, and found it ultimately to be profoundly non-satisfactory, all right? And then rediscovering, in a certain sense, their faith, and rediscovering the church, and discovering that the church and the sacraments and a relationship with Jesus and prayer is really what gives them that needed intimacy, that needed sense of closeness, that love that we're all seeking in a relationship. And we're actually having a conference in Rome as well on October 2nd on these same issues at the Angelicum, right before the Synod. The Synod starts on the 4th. Yes. And so we're having a one-day conference. Cardinal Sarah, who is presiding here, is actually the host of this conference, and Cardinal Powell will be there. It's just a one-day conference, but it's meant to, give exposure to the book and to the ideas. And we're also having people there speak on, again, their experience living out the same-sex lifestyle, discovering God, and being profoundly more happy
I want to talk about the church's position on this, especially in light of the fact that we're talking about same-sex attraction, we're talking about the gay lifestyle. There can be a difference between those two, because the gay lifestyle is an acting out on an interior compulsion or impulse that leads one in the direction of being sexually attracted to somebody of the same gender. The church says that somebody that suffers from that attraction is not in sin if they live a chaste life, but she does call it a disorder, and that hurts the ears of our contemporary culture, doesn't it?
They really don't understand what the church means, and it doesn't seem to give them a lot of consolation when we say we are all disordered. I tend to overeat. That's a disorder. I'm lazy. I'm prone to anger. That's all disordered, meaning you are not ordering your appetites to what is good and what is right. So we're not saying something special about people who have same-sex attraction. The fact that they are attracted to someone of the same sex is their sexual appetites are not properly ordered. Most people's sexual appetites are not properly ordered.
Right.
Wrong person, wrong time, wrong place, wrong way, you name it. And so it's unfortunate that they hear it to have a special application to same-sex attraction when really it's the human condition because of original sin. So it's true that simply because if I want to eat too much but I discipline myself, I'm achieving virtue. It's a good thing. The temptation is not the problem. It's the giving in that's the problem. So we're tempted all day long in multiple ways. And that's one of the temptations they experience that most of us don't. But the solution is to learn how to master it, just as we have to master all of our disordered appetites.
Well, how does that fit in? Because obviously you gave a talk about dealing with your mother. You're giving a talk, I think today, had to do with Humanae Vitae. We're talking about same-sex attraction. How does that relate to the World Meeting of Families? How is that impacting families today that you're seeing?
In many ways. First of all, almost everyone you know has someone in their family or in their close circle of friends that has same-sex attraction. Right? So it's pertinent to the family. We love these people. I have it in my family. And you love them and you want to stay in relationship with them, right? So you want to figure, but you don't want to falsify what the reality is. And so trying to, again, living the truth in love, how to speak the truth, but still maintain relationship. And it's very important to maintain relationship, extremely important. But then you have, how else does this affect the family? The fact that the Supreme Court has said that you have a right to marriage, the confusion for young people. If the law, it's the same thing with abortion. When I gave talks on abortion, young people would say, well, if everything you say is true, why doesn't the Supreme Court get it? And I would say you have to be incredibly educated, not overeducated, not to see that abortion takes a human life. You actually have to be incredibly overeducated in order not to see that same-sex physical relationships are wrong. It's something that we quite easily see, honestly. Those things we easily see, but you have to live in a very corrupt culture to be blinded to that. I mean, you talk to these women now, Abby Johnson and others, who spent years in abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood abortion clinics, and now are saying, I cannot believe I did that for all those years. They felt really they were blinded. In a certain sense, it drops from their eyes. And so the whole push to accept same-sex unions is blinding our young people, and it's going to take them a very long time to be able to see the reality there.
You know, as you share about this, we're aware of the fact that there are many families. You're referring to your own family as well. And you say communication, keeping those lines of communication are ultimately important. What else can we do to begin to try to help an individual to see the reality of where they are and to plant into their lives, if you will, the virtue that is necessary to overcome the temptation and or the disorder itself?
Well, one thing is to know a lot about what it is, all right? You have to really learn about it because it's very different. Some people do become very promiscuous, others do not. So don't make assumptions, right? Some people know it's wrong, others claim they don't. So you have to really be very careful not to make assumptions. Learn as much as you can, listen as carefully as you can. What is it that's driving this person to want to move in that direction? How can we meet those needs in legitimate ways? But the important thing is, I think most people honestly do know what's wrong, but they're afraid of loneliness. They're afraid of not having an intimate life and being parts of families. And so we have to make sure that we make them parts of families. We embrace them. Yes, and we invite them to Thanksgiving dinners, and we make sure that there's not a time where they're not included in family gatherings. Now, you know, if they insist on coming with a partner and insist on being very aggressive and that everybody must accept them, you say, we can't have that here, all right? Just as we wouldn't do the same thing with someone who was cohabiting and was really pushing that. You want to say, no, I'm sorry, I have children, I have to teach them a certain thing. So this is my household, there are certain values we live by.
You're really talking about respect, in a sense,
yes.
respecting that person's
Mutual
situation,
respect,
but also
yes.
the mutual respect of understanding
say,
how our family is.
I mean, you're part of our family, we love you.
Well, thank you so much, Janet Smith. We're just out of time. We could spend hours with you, of course. Living the Truth in Love is a new book published by Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. We're going to take a break. Back with much more from the World Meeting of Families here in Philadelphia. Stay with us. And thank you so much for staying with us here at the 8th World Meeting of Families. I'm Doug Keck, on set with Johnette Bankovic, my co-host, coming to you from the Pennsylvania Convention Center right here in the heart of Philadelphia, where the Holy Father, who earlier today in Washington spoke to Congress, will be here for Saturday, and Sunday is going to be in New York in between, and we'll have full coverage of all of that. And I also wanted to thank everybody out there who's hitting our EWTN.com web stream. Over 495,000 hits on our live stream, which is the most we've ever had. Let's keep it. We want to go over 500,000, so I wanted to make sure we said that. And now we're joined Jeanette with somebody who's always growing, always making it bigger. It's Curtis Martin. We know you from Crossing the Goal on EWTN, but you have a much bigger job than that, which is Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, which is growing. And you also happen to be only one of 2 Americans who serve on the Pontifical Council for Evangelization. And one of the talks you're giving about is a breakout session is on the new evangelization. And so many times people say, you know, the old line, what's new about the new evangelization, which is what you're talking about. Tell us.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for that introduction. At first, I thought you were going to make a weight joke that I was always getting bigger. No, it's exciting to be here. I mean, just what an influx of Catholicism into the city and into the country. It's so exciting. And to be able to talk about the new evangelization, which when we started 15, 20 years ago, people didn't really know what we were talking about, and now it's really become a talking point within the church. I think there's still a lot of questions. What's the difference between evangelization and the new evangelization? And how does that affect the family, which is really our theme here this week? So it's exciting to be able to take some time and look at that. It touches all of us. We all know that if there are godly families, healthy families in the world's going to get better, the church is going to get better. And if there aren't godly and healthy families, then the church is going to be weak and the culture is going to suffer. And so really is a critical pivot point in our culture to be able to allow Christ into our homes.
When you talk about the new evangelization, I think the emphasis that we think about most frequently is what John Paul II shared with us about when he talked about mending the Christian fabric of society. So in many ways, we have to catechize and evangelize those who are within our own families, maybe those sitting in the pews beside us at church.
That's a huge part of the new evangelization and I realized when I was in Rome, I served at a synod with Pope Benedict for 3.5 weeks, and I realized in the West, it really is awakening comatose or slumbering Catholics. But in the East, it's about gathering resources because the people are coming, but they just don't know what to do with them. And in the Muslim countries, it's about how do we navigate people coming to Christ in a region where if they welcome them into the churches may be persecuted. So it takes a different form depending on where we are in the country. But here in the first world, in Western Europe and North America, we have to recognize that it is waking slumbering Catholics to have them re-engage and recognize that Christianity is supposed to be a love story. It's not supposed to be just a set of rules and regulations, which are all true, but the context of those rules and regulations are a love story. It's an adventure. And if you miss that, then there's this adage, it goes in parenting, it says rules without a relationship lead to rebellion. And I think sometimes we're very tempted in our life in the church to have that same outcome. We teach the rules, but not the relationship. And then people, when they hit adolescence, the area we work with on college campuses, they're gone, rebellion.
Well, it's all about balance, isn't it, as we always talk about with that. And let me say that because obviously you've done a lot of work besides Crossing the Goal, obviously our people know, but your real work with expanding Focus and getting into the college students out there. Now, are you seeing, it's growing, so what are you seeing on the campus? Is there an excitement of the young people, the John Paul II generation plus? Is there an excitement for the new evangelization?
Doug, what I love is the fact of the matter, where we go proves just one simple truth, and that is Catholicism works. It works. We just lose by forfeit so often because we don't show up. When we show up and bring the truth of Christ and the love of Christ and the mercy of Christ, people respond. It's exactly what they're looking for. And so to be able to have that, and what we've seen over 18 years now is just one campus and then 2 and then 8 and now 113 with more in the wings, 2 part-time staff members to over 1,000 staff members and alumni staff. And it's just exciting. Just before I came on set, a man came up to me and said, my son was involved with Focus, is now a seminarian. Over 400 guys in the last 17 years have entered seminary through our program. And it's just amazing to watch. They're going to go on and change the world. The chaplain at CU Boulder is now a priest. He was one of the first Focus guys. And so it's just neat to see what's happening.
Well, and I think it's so very exciting. As we've been here, Curtis, we've noticed how many new apostolates are cropping up, and they are being started by young people, you know, in their 20s, in their 30s. And I think it's because of the good work that organizations like yours, what Focus has done on these college campuses, awakening these young people, taking that idealism that is very natural to that age and then channeling it in a way that yields great fruit for the kingdom of God. They really do want to do big things. And when we show them the biggest thing you can do is to carry the faith into the culture of the day and into the world, be a proclaimer of truth, my goodness, there's no stopping them.
And we really feel in a certain sense Focus is at a leverage point, as is EWTN, to be able to recognize that if everything in the world needs to be fixed, from contraception, abortion, poverty, disease, famine, pornography. You could pick any area in the culture and you could spend the rest of your life with the light and truth of Christ and not be wasting your time. But where are you going to get the workers? Well, they're college students right now. If you reach second graders, you have to wait a really long time for them to be able to be ready to work, to serve. And if you work in old folks' homes, they're not going to have a whole lot of time to serve. But college students at the very beginning of their adult life, when they hear the call of Christ in their life, can go anywhere He calls them. And that's why we love these apostolates. And one of the things, beginning with EWTN, we were launched on Mother Angelica Live, as you know, Doug. And oh my goodness, I always want to thank you, John. Early, when nobody knew who Focus was or who I was able to be on your show so many times. And your gracious hospitality was just awesome. And so we feel indebted, but the way you pay that is pay it forward to other young groups.
And we had that wonderful series you did with your wife, actually, that had to do with the family as well. Well, I'm wondering too, because our Holy Father and some of what he said in Washington yesterday and today, I think one of the things is a certain examination of conscience for all of us, to step back and look and think in terms of the fact, am I doing what I should be doing? Am I doing enough? And I think the word responsibility comes out there. The idea is that it's not for someone else to do. The question is, what am I doing, and am I doing enough? And is that what we see, the young people see? I have a responsibility. Not only do I have the ability to do it, but I'm actually have a responsibility to do it.
No, and I think we have to recognize this young generation are amazing, but there's never been a group of more distracted people on earth. They have earbuds in all the time. They're playing video games all the time. Many are distracted by pornography and drug abuse. And I don't think there's been a generation in recent memory, or maybe in memory at all, that has been more distracted from hearing God's call in their life. And I really believe it's because Satan is terrified of this generation. That if they were to hear the gospel and respond and accept that responsibility. We send thousands of college students into second and third world missions, and when they come back, they can't live the same anymore. I can't play video games when I know there are people that are starving, that don't have basic medical care, whose family situations are so desperate. I have to live differently. And Christ is the only one who can show me how to live that way, and the only one who can give me the grace to live that way, because it's both truth and grace that we need, right?
Yes. How do you form these young people, Curtis, so that they can go into these places and begin to make a difference there and bring it back and change lives right here in the United States? What I'm thinking about is they're together on the campus. How do you keep them formed and moving in the right direction once they're away from that locus?
I love that question, because sometimes people just jump to the question of what do you do, but really it's about formation. And we are, from the outside looking in, a campus ministry program, but from the inside looking out, we're a campus ministers program. If our campus ministers are well formed, loved on, cared for, they'll bear great fruit. If they're not, their prayer life will suffer and they'll cease to bear fruit. And so really, we start with a 57-week training program. They come for 5 weeks of on-site training, and then the entire next year they're being mentored on campus, and that concludes with 5 more weeks of on-site training. And then they're no longer new staff, but their job is to immediately turn around and start to help those next new staff. And we all know, those of us who have taught the faith, that when you begin to teach the faith, you learn it at a whole different level. So our hope is that at any point in time in Focus, whether you're there for 2 years or for 18 years, the formation and training never stops. And all of that is grounded in a life of prayer. It's so beautiful to have a staff of now 600 people committed to a daily holy hour, because we recognize that if we don't talk to God about college students, it really won't make sense to talk to college students about God. It really has to be grounded in prayer and in the sacramental life. And then you take that grace, which we can't produce on our own, and that's unleashed in our apostolate. And that's the powerful thing. But that formation question, for me, is the $64,000 question. It's what's lacking so often. It's kind of like, well, give me a skill that I could be better at, and then I'll be able to move forward. It's going to take more than skills. We actually have to be transformed people.
That's right. That's right.
And I think that's what's exciting about the World Media Families, and especially going into the exhibit hall and seeing not only people from all over the world, but all of the wonderful Catholic apostolates and ministries that have grown up there, and the religious orders and the sisters, you know, that are there and are bearing fruit. But just the idea that I think Catholics see more and more that they do have a role to play as laity in the appropriate way of looking at Vatican II, right?
We have got part of the new evangelization is getting the message out that you were created, you were conceived in the mind of God before you were conceived in your mother's body, and He loved the idea of you, and He created you to be a fulfillment of that idea. Sin has wounded that, but Jesus has come to fix that problem. You're meant to come alive in Christ, and when you do, then you become what you're meant to be. One of my favorite sayings is a quote from St. Catherine of Siena. She said, if you are what you're meant to be, you would set the world on fire. And most young people don't know that. Most people of any age don't know that. But that's the great truth about Christianity. Not that we love God, but that God loved us, and for a reason. If we were to collaborate with His grace and allow Him to transform us, you and I, we could set the world on fire. And that's true for everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening.
When we think about that great reality, that's Ephesians 1:4. I mean, I love that. God chose us in Him before the world began to be holy and blameless in His sight, to be full of love. When we think about that reality, it is transforming. It takes a person from maybe 0 to 60 in a nanosecond, you know, because that truth ignites the human heart and sets it on fire, allowing them to express that virtue of magnanimity, to do great things for God.
I mean, what that means, John, when we own that, it means that when God said, let there be light, He was actually thinking about you. Not generally, but very specifically, the idea of you unique to all of creation, yes, and loved you as an idea, yes, from the foundation of the world. Not from just your mother's womb. That's the second conception. And people don't realize that thing. Well, it doesn't matter if I play games for 8 hours a day. What does it matter? I'm comfortable. I'm not hurting anybody. Oh my goodness, you're here to solve the world's problems. To address it, I love Pope Benedict said, to address poverty in all of its forms. That's the purpose of evangelization, because once people know Christ, He can call them into all the dark corners of the world and address spiritual, emotional, physical poverty of every kind. And that's exactly what Christ did when He stepped out of heaven into a broken world.
Well, it seems like we should be living our lives in such a way that we are engaged with others, our family, and that we see, in a positive way, something productive. We're not sitting around trying to fill up our time. And it seems like in a lot of ways in our life today, people are looking for ways to fill up their time so maybe they don't have to think about what they should be doing.
And numbing themselves through, distractions. I think of young men who play video games and conquer worlds that don't exist. And then they're exhausted, and there's a real world that needs to be conquered, and they're too tired to go out and do it. And don't win virtual battles. You've been called to a real battle.
But those are tougher and a little scarier. With that, we're going to have to take a break because we're going right to the keynote session. Thank you so much, Curtis. You do great work. Great to be with you again. Jonathan and I will be here with you. We're going to go to the keynote session now with Dr. Juan Francisco de la Guardia, Brin, and Mrs. Gabriela N. de la Guardia. And they're going to be talking about a gift from God, the meaning of human sexuality. We'll be back after this keynote address. Stay with us.
That will be producing at the same time also the testosterone that will be impregnating is the entire embryo, and will be also establishing the differences between the man in his body, the masculine brain and body of the man. In the adolescence, the consolidation of the secondary sexual characteristics will happen. As for example, the beard will grow and the mustache, and it will appear the night ejaculations. And the brain of the man and of the woman, they are different. And therefore, we are able to see that stands out in the different researches and investigations in the different universities in the field of neuropsychology and in the image of how the brain is functioning. Between them, what we are able to see in the studies of our Dr. Regina Verma of the University of Pennsylvania here, together with other studies, as those from Ekimura, Neuro, Sadowski, and many, many more. We are also seeing that they affirm that there are differences, very significant differences, in the activity, the mental activity, and the organization, functional organization of the brain. And they're products of the determination, the genetic determination, the chromosomic determinations, and it's all explained. So this causes men, actually, Adan, Adam in some of the areas to understand many areas better than women, and vice versa. For example, it's very, very simple. To the level of cognitive level, really, we have a greater development of our language, but nevertheless, they have a better perception, spatial perception. And we are more susceptible to psychological levels of depression and of very great difficulties, mental difficulties and anxieties. We are more susceptible than men. And we are able to manage aggression also in a very different way. We do it indirectly with criticism. And sometimes we make, like, irritating comments. Men do it very directly, and they're more violent. And they do it more aggressively in a physical way. And it's for this reason that Dr. Emilio Garcia, professor of the University of Madrid, Spain, he published in a magazine from the Spanish Association of Neuropsychiatry, he published that really there are never any positions that are very simple and ecotomic, separating the sexes biologically from the gender, psychologically, social, and culturally. Man and woman. Also, we have characteristics here in common. What we have human dignity. We also have intelligence. We have will. We have the capacity to love just one person for the very rest of our lives. We are complementing up to all of our genitalia to be able to bring a family together and to be co-creators. Let us go through 3 passages. They're very precious in Genesis. And the details of love and kindness of God with us. When he tells us, it's not good that a man remain alone. I am going to make him a helpmeet as he is. And he did not create another man, he created a woman. And as he explains, as St. John Paul II explains, the expressions there alone to help him, that presents him to live with somebody and to exist for somebody else. And besides, he tells us he will leave his father and his mother, and he will join with his wife, and the two will be one flesh. And what happiness when this is explaining, he is bone of my bones, she is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And immediately he accepts her. And the tremendous responsibility that God gives us when he says to us, be fertile and multiply. There you are, hon. Okay, we have arrived. Okay, now, with this chat, what we're doing. Okay, we have been able to find a definition of sexuality. And actually, it's a co-reality of the ability of the person, the human person, to love God who has found us. And we choose the 2 scientific ways. The scholars in this material. Dr. Jutta Burgas. She is a theologian, a German theologian, an author of various books, innumerable publications, and a feminist way past feminism. as the magazine tells us in Mexico, of values there in Mexico, valores a Mexican. And she tells us, Dr. Burgas, the sexuality is by nature an impulse of one toward another. But it has actually the basis in a love. But love of a gift and joining together to accommodate and to receive. It is a road of responsibility with the love of God throughout the intimate union and the complementary union that cause us to be one body, one flesh. The expression of our person, open to be co-creators with God. The other definition is from Dr. Enrique Rojas. He is very renowned. The psychiatrist has written many books, and he is a researcher of the impression of the changes in personality as aging occurs. He's a candidate of psychology and medical psychiatry. And besides, he's the director of the Spanish Institute of Research, Psychiatric Research in Madrid, Spain. He tells us the sexuality is a component, a fundamental component of each person. The maturity and the personality consists, amongst other things, within knowing your sexuality, understanding why it serves and to govern it, to control it, to be owner of it, and not to the contrary or the inverse. The sexuality is love. As a commitment, there is a relation between the physical, psychological, and a spiritual, and biological. The sexual continues and follows love. It is body to body. The sexuality with love is from person to person, and actually within quotes. And now we're going to put a slide up. So 2 versions here of our experts and focus on sexuality and a commitment of love. Love, where there is commitment, different from just seeking pleasure and feelings. And from school, we have been taught that our body has various systems of survival. And of the species, of the individual. The individual, we have our breathing, we have our circulation system, all of these systems, etc., etc. But in the species, we only have the reproductive system or the sexual system. We are completely complementary in history. We study the part of the man and the woman, male and female together, not separately from them. And especially, there's a prolonged period of maturation from puberty when truly the objective is completed. And this is the biological part. In the psychological part and spiritual part, it's way longer to develop. To be able to assure the conservation of the species. The same as the animals, we have a reproductive instinct. And we actually has a tremendous impulse to bring us to pleasure of copulation. And the different from the animal and the people is the attraction that we have. It is not only an instinct. It involves much more. And we call it sexuality. As Aurelio Fernandez has said in his theological and moral book, the sexuality is not just in the genitalia system, nor does it just have pleasure as an end. It embraces 7 different important fields as chromosomic, morphologic, and rational, will, the emotional, the sentimental, and the self-pleasuring instinct. The last 2 are what has been tremendously focused on in these last days. Now, even though biologically we have an instinct, we have reproductive instinct within us, actually as people, we can dominate this instinct throughout reason, our wills, centered in the emotion and the satisfaction of the opening of our lives with the consequence transcendencia of within us. Ours is not just for reproduction. We procreate. We are co-creators with the love of God. We are going to bring new people into this world who need to be loved and who need our love and need to be taken care of, to offer them the very best environment that would be possible. Because we are the species, the weakest species of the entire, we're the weakest figure of the entire animal species. So within the maturation, this is the maturation of our sexuality and of our love. We have many progressive areas. They are attraction, physical attraction, or our behavioral attraction with another person, and the falling in love, the precious moment of when we fall in love, the idealization of the person, and finally, the conjugal love, which is where where we are able to procreate, and that is the procreating part of our love. So actually it is like each step is a prerequisite, that if we have it, we will be able to actually create and be one of them. But never will we arrive to just be all together. That is the happiness of our love. And Miguel Leite declared this as far as the banquet of our love. In the magazine, The Focus of Sexuality and Love, a solid phase has 2 forms of having sexuality. The first, it's according to what God desires, in midst of respect and the dignity and worthiness and honesty. The second is, let us be carried away with our passion, and be sure that that is going to get us into problems if we just opt to have the second only phase. And in sexuality, as it's like rules of transit, especially as our stoplights. We have green lights. It says, go right on forward. The yellow says, take care, cautious, here we come with red. And the red definitively says, stop. And this is not for just having any kind of liberty. These are lights that we have to respect in order to arrive in our destination. They are there to protect us and to protect all the rest. And just imagine, what would happen if, because we ought to respect freedom, or, quote, the right of everybody, let's just say every driver is going to do whatever he wants with whatever stoplight he sees. I just don't think that's what we want, right? So with respect to, no, wait. So God has put lights and signals, traffic signals even, to protect our body, our mind, and our spirit. We need to respect them. Or if not, we're going to have consequences. So with respect, or we'll be driving too fast, she said. With respect to our sexual self, the behavioral aspects of our sexuality, what we need to do is offer what Dr. Viktor Frankl has said. He is a psychiatric neurologist, founder of the humanist therapy, and he has been survivor of various Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz in Dachau. He's the author of the book, The Man Looking for Sense. He says a very important phrase, it just is amazing to me. He says, the desire, sexual desire, only just causes us to grow immediately in the context of an existential emptiness. Sex is evaluated because it is unhumanized. It is dehumanized. The human sex is more than just procreate sex. Human sex is the expression of love. And only in that moment, we're able to incorporate the love. Only in that moment can we incorporate the thing of an experience, a true experience that is truly pleasing. But this love requires there to be respect amongst us. We are people, and the body of each one is, in his intimacy, is made to be respected and loved. And actually, the objective of our sexuality, to only have the sex, is a great problem with the dignity of each person. Respect for each one, as far as the sexuality, begins because we love. We preserve our intimacy, and we are able to join together. We should not invite other people that they would see us as an object of their pleasure, because we are not an exhibition merchandise. We are not things. We are much more than that. Shame is really difficult. And in this book we would read, chastity is not holding oneself back, but it is affirmation of following the will of love. It is a virtue that maintains youth in love at whatever moment in their lives. Close quote. And in this direction, the Cardinal Carbujín also speaks. And open quotes, give himself actually means compromise his own worthiness in order to really understand the worth of the other person and what he called the gift of oneself. And he continued with the following. When it's to the contrary, and that is lacking, the sense of significance of where sexuality falls is introducing into civilization things that are not people things. It's a civilization in which people are used as things. Every person exists and takes his origin from the existing of sexuality from his parents. And our great responsibility as parents, fathers, and mothers, the responsibility of the church to transmit to our young people the great worth of the human person and of his understand sexuality, a great understanding that is an expression of love and it is a gift of God. There's another manifestation of the emotion of sexuality. The parents to their children, and the emotion between sisters and brothers, or the sexual emotion and care. Really, the emotional care between all. But in no way, none of this type of caring emotion should there be genitalia. Really, that should be reserved for the love of commitment. Write down commitment. For a Christian, there is always the possibility that God would call you to live in a very great intimacy only with God, not through another person, that which the theologians call it the highest point of the mystery, of the nuptial mystery. Pope Benedict XVI in the encyclica said, God is love, and it shows that this way, as actually a reciprocal gift of man and wife, is the excellence of human love, then the celibacy and the virginity is the renouncement of, for entire life, there would be marriage because of the kingdom of God, of heaven. And this is a legitimate and love between man and woman to present a family are actually overcome in the celibacy and in the heart of the man and of the woman who are celibate. Love has not turned off. Their love is requiring. The hearts are needing love. Their choice is exclusively intimate and complete. Their love with Christ and the church to be a beneficiary of all church and of all, to benefit all humanity. It's false that celibacy is against nature. Man and woman who is a celibate and a virgin do not express their sexual able to create. They have a fullness of their feelings, and this is the richness of this is super abundant. And the virtuous woman, that not everyone understands celibacy, only those who understand it, who have a fervent love for God. Saint John Paul II, for him, he said, celibacy is a gift of God, much like the precious pearl that is found and is sold to obtain everything. And as the Pope Francis has said, you should feel the same happiness as fatherhood or motherhood, but spiritual, the same joy, but always in the same way. Give your life. Become a father or a mother. And we ask ourselves, in this world that is so materialistic, would it be for the pleasure? How would we be able to live the celibacy and renounce and the sacrifice that it implies? The virginity for the kingdom of God is a development of the grace received in baptism. And as such, we are called in that to grow. For that we, our parents, have brought up our children and formed in them holiness and the love of God. Sanctity and the love of God. And we understand that there is a sacrifice of the material, but the joy and the happiness that we are able to find, we are willing for that. We are willing to hear the call of God. John remembered this moment in that Jesus, yes. Juan remembered the moment that Jesus called him to follow him. It was more or less the 10th hour. And remember At what hour? Do you remember what hour the Lord called you? You who are here, who are joined together here with us, to hear us here. Remember your calling. Marriage is love. One definition, a marvelous definition, that describes the Christian marriage, gives us Tertulliano, the writer of the 3rd century. And he says, how could I describe the joy and happiness of love that is joined by the church, reinforced by sacrifice and confirmed by blessing? How? What couple? Two believers with just one hope together, one hope, one desire, only one way of living, and only one service. Sons of one Father, children of one Father, servants of one Lord, never separated from the Spirit, one in flesh, really two in one flesh. And there, where the flesh is just one, there also in the Spirit, they are one. Precious. Also, the author of Burggraf told us, married couples, those who are together, companions, they do not just live purely one for another. Spouses live together for Christ. Because their unity joins in Christ. Spousal unity. And in the book Conversation by the writer Jose Firma, we saw, he comments to us, Christian spouses should be conscious of the fact that they are called to holiness, being made holy. That they are called to be apostles, and that their first apostolate is in their home. They should understand the work, supernatural work, that implies the foundation of a family, the education of the children, and the idealization of the Christianity in the society. And from this consciousness and of their own mission, it depends on a great part on the efficiency and the success in their lives. Close quote. And we ourselves would add that with this mission depends, their joy and happiness depends on that mission. Me equivoqué. I put my finger where it was not really supposed to be. Okay, we need to stop on time, right? Yeah, but you went on, look, now we're into the family here. Let's go. Right here, family. Family, we're going to talk about family. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Okay, right here. Let's go. Okay, we're going here. Okay. Okay, we're going to start over again here. No. Okay, ya no más. Okay, we're going to talk about love. And love. The love of in marriage and love of commitment. We're going to talk about the love of marriage. It comes to a love of commitment. Because it's not the same commitment. Nor does it express in our same love. To commit ourselves with one person. We're just going to commit ourselves to one person while we still have the feelings. Or maybe we're going to get a legal commitment, and we could just break it at whatever moment. No, it is a commitment to God. And the person would say, I commit myself freely to you before God, to love you for the entire life, to be faithful in the good and in evil, in health and in sickness, to collaborate with you, to work with you in our creative work, and to educate with responsibility to our children that God would give us. And the Spanish Conference says that God actually has understood spousal love is his love. And the love in marriage is in the Human Colloquial in November of last year, great religious leaders reminded us and made it very clear that marriage is an institution, natural and right, that is farther out than just theological. It's actually a tendency, it bypasses governmental tendencies and inclusive. It also bypasses just the minorities that need to be respected because of their rights. In the public area, the legal area, inspired by Ángel Rodríguez Lullo, in the book that he wrote, The Greatness of Human Love, says to us, he says, marriage has an institutional dimension. And this means that it implies actually important interest for the society, that it needs a definition, and it needs a regulation, and it needs protection because of the levels of our society. Not every relationship, interpersonal relationship, has this same dimension. It requires the direct interest of law. To have a juridic, legal, require or not any personal emotion, means it's introducing a self-destructive principle. Close quotes. So when the same value is given to all, what is lost is the important thing has lost its true value. I will continue in family. We have a very great problem here. And since we're waiting for our interpreter, our beautiful interpreter, we just have 7 more minutes left, and we're not going to be able to finish. Go. And so the second, be fertile and multiply, and fill the land. And this is Genesis 1:98. Our family, our major responsibility there is our actual major realization, our best correspondence, i.e. with the love of God. And the family is a space in which we are able to have children, and we have love. We have formation of them. We help them. We give them protection. We give them compensation. We give them solidarity. We give them character, and we give them trust, in where we are able to establish their emotions that are just invaluable. And the space where we're able to educate them in the faith and in the Christian values that are the most important reference to be able to live together our own beliefs well-formed in a true liberty. And the family, as Pope Francis has said, has strength in itself. The family is family. And actually, since it actually shows that family in marriage, a basis of marriage and human sexuality, is very well understood. in the family, we also form love and care that take us through any violent moment, takes us through pregnancy, and together the formation of the family and everything. Actually, these moments are our responsibility as parents and mothers, fathers and mothers. Our lack of attention, if we have a lack of filial love, brotherly love, and to give the example that actually shows the example of our love, so that the very sexuality thing that's able with our children. Parents these days are very, very busy and very tired, and to be able to listen to each one of the members of our family and actually to feel them and to cause them to feel loved and to be them recognized. And sometimes our cell phones have more importance than our children do. And the parents and mothers and fathers are the greatest bonds of emotion for our children. And we are called to be their help, their guide, their apostles. And with our example of faith, our happiness and our peace. And what we ought to be is examples. We have examples in our faith, to not just our faith, not just be founded in the religion of you can't do it. No. That is not a foundation, and that is not today's religion. Actually, it is founded in a religion that really surrounds us with the love of Christ, an attractive religion that teaches us to say, here I am for you, and I'm here always, so that you can see in me the love of God, and the love in our sexuality, and the love in our marriage, and the love in our family, and also in our faith. And the hate and violence, does not carry us to any good place. And besides, it's not even Christian. To protect the family is defended, and to anything else is to the contrary. We need to be proactive. We need to make laws that are able to move the family, because society needs the family, solid family, happy family, and fertile family. That we could be a total attractiveness for the rest to see. And for this, the Christians, and especially governments, and in the hierarchy, we actually have a great deal to do. We have a lot to pray for, and we have a lot to help, beginning with not being accomplices to just try to wait and to not just to cause us, not to make the family into just pieces. We do not need to make the family piecemeal. We need to join it together. We need to be very careful and to take care of our family and have a wonderful language, a relative language today, where everything, we do not want everything to have the same value. So and specifically, with the ideology of our sexes. As Cardinal Calfara has said, it's a tsunami for which we need to be prepared. And actually the best way to be prepared is to require good Christians, better parents, better children, and better brethren, husbands and wives, and better apostles. We are called to be apostles. In the moment that we are able to separate ourselves from the united means of being procreators, we are leaving our love and we convert ourselves in just a pleasureful act. And that's what has happened. That's what John Paul II said when he spoke about the ideology and the sexuality of life. Actually, it's our growth throughout our society and our networks. The lack of shame and the lack of morals are causing us to dishonor the greatness of this gift. And we have two types of evangelization. The scientific evangelization that believes that man is part of a material world, and therefore he has the right to make an object of investigation, experimentation, manipulation, and scientific and technical manipulation, even the utilization of the human substance with commercial ends. And he is actually doing this. It's turning into a very lucrative thing. Our sexuality, it's recreational and pleasurable. Actually, he helps himself by contraception, whose consequences, actually, now we have been warned by Paul VI in his 6th month. And we have 34 seconds left. And let's just speak about a couple of behaviors that are actually against chastity and against the purity of love, technique of reproduction, and ideology of gender. That is what is left here with us. It's being done away with. What we want to do is, we just have a blank page for this. And on this blank page, we're going to be writing our own project of our life. We can write here, or we can tear it up and we'll scratch it out. Therefore, we want to ask, for example, have you seen pornography? Has it bothered you? Have you given it to somebody? Have you had relationships, sexual relationships before marriage? Do you use sexual contraception thinking that this is, you're not going to have any type of, you're not going to have AIDS or anything like that? Do you know that when you have sexual relationships, you have sexual relationships with the history of the person with whom you are having sex? The World Organization of Health reported in the year of 2013 that every day 1 million people are getting a sexual disease. Do you inject? Do you use contraceptivals? Do you have anticonception? Are you in your different doctrines? Are you in any type of this area? Have you used the pill of the day? You know? Have you had an abortion? And dears, after having had this, we have multiplied the number of abortions. And with this, you know, the obstetricians, North American, in 2007, published that the major access to contraception, emergency, now it's actually not lowering the number of pregnancies that are happening. And probably it is actually increasing the promiscuity, but it's all the adolescents and teenagers. We're seeing the pharmacology. How many times has this gone up? Have you helped in an abortion? True? And actually, your resume that you're going to present when you see God, or actually, what is happening? Do you want to present that type of a resume, or do you want to present one that God can write? Now, gender ideology. What we're saying is, man or woman, it's independent of feeling male or female. We have scientific evidence for this. We can read the lexicon. It shows that instead of being a man that's masculine or a woman who's feminine, you can be gay, lesbian, homosexual, transsexual, bisexual, and on. And remember, the Catholic Church requires that a person needs to be treated with respect and care, because of sexual relationships between people of the same sex are against natural law. They cannot procreate one or another, and it ends in closing God's gift. When are we going to stop? Until when are we going to keep stepping and stomping on sexuality? In order to finish now, Okay, now this is presented what we wanted to begin up until our conclusion. Faith, the presence of God 24/7. Joy because we are Christians and we know who our Father is. And love because this is what has been taught with us, and our love of life. And the happiness that Christians are feeling always corresponds to the love with which we were created. And it's whether it's through celibacy in communion, direct communion with Him, or whether it's through marriage and communion direct with those our people, it's both in Christ. Let us be examples of His love in our marriage, in our family, and in our society. We are facing up to the creation of love. It's the foundation of sexuality. And the biology of gender is that man can really have love, faith, life, sexuality, marriage, family, and even God. This is a concept that I've been manipulated these days, and through this theology with various other principles. And they're trying to make laws and interpretations of this truth. And as we say, Lord, as Jose Domingo Duala said, Archbishop of Panama, writing on the family in 2014, he said, this is a clear message and precise message, and it is clear the worst thing in the cultural life in which we live. If really we want to convince somebody of our words, we need to be more careful with the transmission of our faith of the Lord and His doctrine. So, close quote. Just do what they say. Maria los Servientes have said. And he says to us, what we would like to end, finally, we just have the intention of the Holy Father and our Mother Virgin. Help our faith, lead our faith. We also ask, through our Holy Mother, intercede for all of us who are collaborating in the next sort of family. Thank you so very much.
Here we are, still at the World Media Families. We just saw the ending of that particular keynote address, and obviously that one was given by a couple from Panama, and actually in Spanish. And of course, I'm Doug Keck here, joined on set with Jeanette Benkovic. As we've been talking, this is a cornucopia of Catholicism from around the world, multiple languages, things being done in Vietnamese, Italian, and obviously English and Spanish, of course, we know. And we're joined on set as well by the president of Students for Life of America, Kristen Hawkins. And welcome, Kristen.
Thanks for having me today.
Now, you've done a lot of other things. You've got more different groups than I think we have time to talk about. But one of the things that's always interesting when we see people, I saw Scott Hahn walking by earlier, is you're a convert to Catholicism, right?
That's right.
Right. So why is it somebody yourself who's a convert, why are you so involved?
Well, you know, this is an issue that touched my heart at a very young age. I was 15, and I started working at a Catholic Pregnancy Resource Center. And that's actually what led me back home to the church, was my involvement in the pro-life movement. It wasn't the other way around. I didn't come home to the church and then get involved in the movement. It was actually joining the pro-life movement, being surrounded by faithful Catholics who were on fire for their faith, learning about the faith and what being Catholic truly means is what made me come home.
It's always interesting to me when you hear these stories to realize that this is the way evangelization takes place. Sometimes people think that the only way in which it takes place is in big venues and through, you know, international apostolates like EWTN. We certainly do a lot of good work in promoting the message, but the most expedient way of witnessing is by talking one-on-one.
Right.
And that's what captures the heart, because you saw the zeal in these people. And obviously, even at that young age, Kristen, you were very involved in pro-life activities. Did that come from some background experience that you had?
Well, it came from my family. I was raised in a non-denominational home, always taught that abortion was wrong, it was something we didn't do. But I think if you would have asked me at 15 how I felt about abortion, or should abortion be illegal, I would have said, well, I don't know, who am I to say what a woman should do? But it was really that experience of going into that crisis pregnancy center and meeting those women who were there, who truly believed there was no other choice for them, and building that relationship. And I'm a big believer of relationships, because that's how we convert people from pro-choice to pro-life. That's how we bring people into our faith. I always say on college campuses with our students for life groups, it's kind of secret evangelization, because you have so many students that they went to Catholic high school or middle school, and they've gone to college, and they start questioning their faith. They're surrounded by others who tell them that you can't possibly believe that. They join a pro-life group because that's a very neutral thing. It's a human rights movement to join. But then they suddenly find themselves surrounded with Catholics and other believers. And that's what actually brings them back to their faith, and brings them into the church.
Well, one of the things that we were talking a little bit before we came on, while the end of the keynote there, one of the things interesting, obviously, Students for Life, we know all of the stuff with the undercover, the Planned Parenthood, and everything we see in the horrible videos, you know, and things going back and forth. And, you know, here we are trying to reach out to the general public, let alone to Catholics who are out there, and say, you know, you need to relook at this and realize what Planned Parenthood's really all about, Margaret Sanger, the history. But then you're also dealing with a situation now, you've got bumper stickers and things about defunding Planned Parenthood, but you still actually, amazingly, have a couple of people who are here at this convention who think enough about the World Meeting of Families to come here, who are upset that you're trying to do that. So if we can't convince the people who are already here, how are we going to convince the world?
Well, you know, I think we have a lot of people who are just uninformed about what Planned Parenthood does. And I always challenge people when they come up to us at events like this, arguing with us about Planned Parenthood, telling us Planned Parenthood does a lot of really good things. I say just go to a Planned Parenthood. Go to a Planned Parenthood and ask them what they can provide to you. Because I've been to Planned Parenthoods, many of them, while I was pregnant. I asked them if they had prenatal vitamins, if I should take them. Oh, we don't do that. What about adoption referrals? We don't do that. They have a very systematic agenda, and that is to teach sex ed into our schools, get young people going to them at a young age, get them hooked on carcinogenic and abortifacient birth control, get them coming back for STD tests and treatment, and then coming back for an abortion. It is this create a customer business cycle. That is what they're about. There's over 13,000 fairly qualified health centers that we already fund that do way more than Planned Parenthood will ever do, serve women and children for free. Planned Parenthood, the first thing they tell you when you go in for an abortion is that will be $150. By the way, if you change your mind, that's non-refundable. Now we'll talk about the procedure. $150 up front. You tell me what they're about.
You know, as you share about that, it's so upsetting because the marketing is very different, and the rhetoric that's put out is very different from that, and indicates that there's this whole, you know, menu of services for women. All we hear with regard to Planned Parenthood is women's reproductive health. And there's nothing about that that has anything to do with reproduction. It's all about no production. And as you say, none of it is healthy for women. So the whole concept of women's health, women's reproductive health in light of Planned Parenthood is at best an oxymoron, and at worst a lie.
That's right, and that's what the American people, they've been lied to. We had this Women Betrayed rally. We had 70 cities in July. We've done events with Sarah Palin at Capitol Hill. We're doing everything we can, and we're using the messaging, women betrayed. Because not only are they ripping our children piece by piece and selling each piece for profit, they're lying to the American people, and they're lying to women. They're lying to young women when she comes to them in crisis and says, I don't know what to do, and they say, oh, abortion will make it go away. It's a lie.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you work with a lot of these women after the fact.
Right.
Abortion does not make women happy.
That's exactly right. And we're actually taking out social media ads. We're not a post-abortive healing ministry, but we've been putting our donor dollars to these ads online because there's so many women right now who've seen these videos, these undercover videos, and are hurting. Our pregnancy centers are exploding with women who are coming in going, oh my gosh, I never realized. And there are more hurting men and women today than there's ever been in our country.
Well, Yeah, and I was thinking about what you were saying as well, because then on top of it, they spin it into the fact that, well, at least you can donate your baby for science and help things out. You know, it's what the Nazis thought about with the extermination camps. At least we can do some research here as a way of assuaging people's upsetment with this, just to compound the sin.
It's absolutely horrifying. There's no good that comes out of donating your child. That is your child that you were created, that was created in the image of God, that has been ripped apart piece by piece. And for them to even try to morally equate,
well, one of the things I think that I find most frustrating is the lack of logic in this. Here's the fact, and I'm piggybacking on what you said there, Doug. Fact of the matter is they want to sell these parts of these babies for profit. Why? Because it's human tissue. Oh, if it's human tissue, then was that a baby or was that just a blob of tissue? No, they only have value because it's human tissue. That child is a child.
That's right. And Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood, is going to be up on the Hill next week testifying, and they've been saying everything's been taken out of context. The question we need to ask Cecile Richards is, in what context does cutting up the middle of the face to reach the brain, when is that good? The context of a less crunchy abortion technique. In what context is that ever okay?
Well, we've got to run because there's so much to talk about. You're doing great work. It's not a lack of context, it's lack of conscience, I think, is what we're dealing with. Thanks so much for that interview, Kristen Hawkins. I'm Doug Keck here with Jonette Benkovic. Much more ahead. We've got Catholic author Rose Sweet. Stay with us right here at the World Meeting of Families. And thank you for staying with us. Doug Keck along with Jonette Benkovic at the Pennsylvania Convention Center, as we have been all week in Philadelphia for the 8th World Meeting of Families. And now we're joined on set by Rose Sweet, Catholic author and speaker. And you're going to be one of the breakout speakers as well, talking about I Am With You, Struggling with Divorce. Welcome here. Now, Rose, that's one of the things we've been hearing a lot about lately as well, with some of the discussions with the not only here at the World Meeting of Family, but certainly with the Family Synod coming up. And sometimes there can be some consternation among Catholics who are saying, well, I'm trying to deal with the Church's belief in indissolubility of marriage, and how do we relate to divorce? The Holy Father made some statements about annulment. So how does that all fit into the family?
You said some consternation. You know, the average Catholic, we don't understand what the Church teachings on marriage or divorce or annulment, but we think we do. And that's where those myths and misconceptions come in. And so when we hear Pope Francis say something like, let's shake it up and make it faster in some cases, a lot of people are reacting on fear and lack of information and knowledge. So we in the Church, we have a job to do to get out there and to explain, this is what the Church teaches. Don't worry. We're going to preserve the sanctity of marriage. We're going to preserve the indissolubility of marriage, the permanence. None of that has changed. But we got a little bit of mess over here and confusion, so let's clean that up and make it better for everybody. And I'm excited about it.
You know, we had the opportunity to do a series of programs on EWTN through Women of Grace with you, Rose. And you did a very good job at helping us to understand what the Church does teach and what it is when we talk about annulment, that annulment is not a Catholic divorce.
Right.
It goes back to the beginning, the inception of the marriage, and whether or not there were impediments that existed at that time. Share with us a little bit about that divorce, the annulment process, because you yourself have gone through that process, and now you counsel and help others go through that process.
I do, and it's such a blessing and a testament to our Lord, who takes the mess of our life, and if we open up to Him, He will make something beautiful and big and healing out of it. And so that's what He's done for me. I had to submit myself in humility and obedience to the Church in the annulment process. Now, right away, those two words kind of scare people, because if you don't trust the Church, who wants to submit to the Church? But that's what we're trying to help people understand. You can trust them. So, and the Church says, let's take a look, Rose, at where you were on your wedding day and what preceded that, and where he was, and let's take a good, hard look. And you have to be kind of honest about it and vulnerable too. But they're like doctors, and they say, doctor, we're going to put you in front of the x-ray machine, and, you know, and we might give you a little shot, it might like sting here or there, but it's all toward your health and to discover, look, you gave it your best shot. You wanted to do it the right way, but something big was in the way of a valid bond being formed on that day when you said I do. That's it in a nutshell. But
and it doesn't have anything to do with divorce in the civil sense. In other words, a lot of people will say, well, does that make the children illegitimate?
That, you know, again, those are some of the myths. No, the church respects and honors the civil arena. You know, we're in the world. You know, Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And the church says you had a valid civil marriage, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about another dimension of your union and your attempt to bond the way that Christ bonds with his church. And that's what the church is looking at. It's really two separate things.
Right, and you're talking about the sacramental marriage and the bonding, and really where the church is a witness to the vows that are being given between husband and wife. And the question then becomes, going back to see whether that person, the people involved, had impediments to a full commitment to that sacramental bond, right? And
severe impediments, you know, grave, and you could, maybe you were fine, but the other person wasn't. And that's the frustration a lot of people say, you know, I gave it my best, in my mind it was sacramental, but I go, I know, honey, but there was another person, and sometimes you don't really know that other person. And another interesting thing too, it doesn't always have to be sacramental to be valid. The church actually teaches that marriage is so deeply written in the heart of man and woman that even two atheists, if they understand marriage as a lifelong commitment to raise children, can enter a valid marriage.
That's very interesting. One of the other confusions that we have is that divorced people cannot receive communion. And this is a lot of what's fomenting, I think, a sickness of heart for many people, thinking, well, have I been in sin all of these years? I've had an annulment, but I am remarried. You know, does this apply to me?
Well, we forget that the basic teaching of the church is this is our Lord Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. And nobody in the state of any serious sin should approach to open up to receive him. Sin offends him. And so if you have been civilly divorced, there may not be serious sin involved in that for you. So if you're not in the state of serious sin, civil divorce does not preclude you from receiving Holy Communion.
Right, and that's where, like Jeanette said, I think that many times you've had some confusion where people say, well, because you're divorced, you can't. It's if one becomes divorced and then one without an annulment then gets remarried, that then becomes, or could be, a serious reason not to go to marriage, unless you're living as brother and sister, technically.
Right, and here's the thinking behind it. If I remarry, not the church's way, my own way, outside of the church, I have now put myself outside of full communion with the church. So if you're not in full communion, you don't receive communion.
Yes. Well, you've in effect excommunicated yourself. You know, there's not been any decree that said you're not in full communion, but you have placed yourself outside of that full communion by your action.
Right. You're still part of the church. You're not excommunicated, but you're not allowed to present yourself until you get yourself suitable in a state of grace.
I have a question for you too with regard to the annulment process. Now here in the United States, it seems that in most dioceses, probably not all, but in most, there is a rather efficient way in which the annulment process is conducted. But in other places of the world, that annulment process can be very difficult, very long. And I even know of a couple in another country where their annulment was submitted 10 years ago, still hasn't been processed, and they've been living as brother and sister all of these years, which I think is heroic virtue and speaks to the depths of their love of God and His church. So share with us a little bit about the annulment process here versus in other parts of the world.
You know, we're the culture of the microwave oven, right? And we want everything instant. And yes, it is difficult because we have a lot of part-time people working in tribunals. Our average time is 1 year to 2 years here in the United States, and that 10-year thing is ridiculous. But again, if there's no full-time staff and a good system set in place to handle the wounded coming in, you're going to have those kind of abuses. And you know, I guess it's like taking medical supplies into a foreign country, into a third world country. And the people won't even come to the hospital for a long time.
And I guess in some ways, I think what our present Holy Father, who's here in the United States as we speak, of course, is saying we're also dealing in a world that's different than it maybe was 50 years ago for our parents, or even when we were growing up, in the sense of how the family was looked at, how marriage was dealt with. There's a lot of cultural destruction we're dealing with, as John Paul II said, you know, the culture of death, really, and it's also infecting the family and has destroyed relationships. And to some degree, we're trying to deal with the carnage there and trying to find out through the year of mercy coming up, the Jubilee year, how can we reach out to people and make sure that at least if you do have a valid situation where you could say that there wasn't a valid marriage, that we make it easy enough for you to have your hearing and to at least get that opportunity to have that mercy dispensed, right?
Right, without changing any of the beautiful teachings of the church on marriage at all. Right, right. That's exactly it.
So we cannot expect to hear something new and different from Pope Francis. What we can expect is an attempt to take a very real human issue, put it into the heart of Holy Mother Church, and help to make the process as effective and as efficient as possible.
Yes, and the thing I would like to say to anybody who's very concerned about it is what Jesus told us. Fear not. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Now, we're going to maybe go up and down and in and out and go through some tough times, but we're going to be okay. And Jesus said that. So let's move forward with that.
That's right, exactly. Thank you so much, Rose. Thanks for what you do. I know a lot of people out there hurting, need help. And we are just out of time, Johnette, for this segment of our coverage of the World Meeting of Families. We'll be back a little later with more coverage. Of course, you can keep all up to speed with us with our papal coverage by following us on EWTN with Raymond and his team in Washington and in New York. Go to our website, www.ewtn.com. Our Facebook page, of course, like us there. Check out our mobile app, very, very popular. And from the World Meeting of Families, I'm Doug Keck in Philadelphia. We'll see you soon.